In 2026, something interesting is happening in the desktop world, and it's not loud, flashy, or driven by marketing hype. It's quiet, personal, and for millions of users, deeply emotional. Windows 10 users are reaching the end of a long journey. After more than a decade of updates, familiarity, and routine, Windows 10 is officially approaching its sunset. For many, this isn't just about an operating system losing support. It feels like being pushed out of a home you've lived in for years. Forced upgrades, hardware requirements that make perfectly good PCs feel obsolete, increasing system demands, constant background services, and an ever-growing sense that your computer is no longer truly yours. In the middle of this uncertainty, one name keeps coming up again and again in forums, YouTube comments, Reddit threads, and word-of-mouth conversations. Zorin OS 19. Zorin OS 19 isn't trying to scream for attention. It isn't trying to reinvent computing or force users to relearn everything they know. Instead, it does something far more powerful. It listens. It understands the fear, frustration, and fatigue of Windows 10 users who just want a computer that works the way they expect it to. When people boot into Zorin OS 19 for the first time, the reaction is often the same. Surprise, relief, sometimes even disbelief. This looks familiar. This feels comfortable. I don't feel lost. For a Windows 10 user in 2026, familiarity matters more than ever. Many users aren't enthusiasts. They're students, office workers, freelancers, small business owners, retirees, creators, and everyday people who rely on their computers for real life. Zorin OS 19 respects that reality. The desktop greets you with a layout that feels immediately understandable. A taskbar where you expect it. A start menu that behaves logically. System settings that don't feel buried under layers of abstraction. Everything about the experience says, you already know how to use this. But Zorin OS 19 isn't just copying Windows for comfort. Beneath that familiar surface is a system that feels lighter, faster, and calmer. On the same hardware that Windows 10 struggles with in 2026, Zorin OS 19 feels alive again. Boot times are noticeably faster. The system doesn't grind to a halt because of background updates or telemetry services. Applications open quickly, multitasking feels smooth, and older machines that were written off as too slow suddenly feel useful again. For many users, this alone is enough to make the switch permanent. One of the biggest reasons Windows 10 users are flocking to Zorin OS 19 is control. In Windows, control has slowly slipped away. Updates install when the system decides, not when the user is ready. Features appear and disappear without consent. Online accounts are increasingly mandatory. Advertising sneaks into places it doesn't belong. Zorin OS 19 feels like stepping back in time to when the computer worked for you, not the other way around. Updates are transparent and respectful. You choose when to install them. Nothing reboots without your permission. Nothing spies on you by default. There's no pressure to sign into an account just to use your own machine. Privacy in 2026 isn't a niche concern anymore. It's mainstream. Windows 10 users have grown increasingly uncomfortable with how much data modern operating systems collect. Zorin OS 19 takes a firm stance here. No telemetry harvesting your behavior. No ads in the operating system. No hidden tracking services running in the background. For users who simply want to browse the web, write documents, watch videos, or work on projects without being monitored, Zorin OS 19 feels like a breath of fresh air. Another massive factor driving the migration is hardware freedom. Windows 10's end of life doesn't just mean no updates. It often means pressure to buy new hardware that meets newer requirements. Perfectly capable PCs are suddenly deemed unsupported. Zorin OS 19 runs beautifully on a wide range of systems, including older laptops and desktops that would struggle or be locked out entirely on newer Windows versions. This matters deeply in 2026 as users become more conscious of e-waste, costs, and sustainability. Zorin OS 19 gives hardware a second life instead of sending it to a landfill. For former Windows users, software compatibility is often the biggest fear. Will my apps work? Zorin OS 19 addresses this fear head-on. Out of the box, it supports a huge ecosystem of applications. Popular browsers, office suites, media players, design tools, and productivity apps are readily available through a clean, simple software store. Many Windows applications run seamlessly using built-in compatibility layers, often without the user even needing to understand what's happening behind the scenes. For everyday tasks, the transition feels far smoother than most people expect. Office work is a huge part of why Windows 10 stuck around for so long. Zorin OS 19 handles this effortlessly. Document editing, spreadsheets, presentations, PDFs, email, calendars, and cloud storage all work reliably. File formats remain compatible. Collaboration doesn't break. For many users, the realization hits quickly. I didn't actually need Windows for this. Everything I care about still works, and in some cases, it works better. Gaming, once a major weakness of Linux-based systems, is no longer the deal-breaker it used to be. In 2026, Zorin OS 19 benefits from years of progress in gaming compatibility and performance. A massive portion of popular games run smoothly. Controllers work out of the box, and performance is often comparable to Windows 10, especially on older hardware where Windows overhead becomes a bottleneck. Casual gamers, indie fans, and even many mainstream players are discovering they don't have to give up their hobby to leave Windows behind. Then there's the emotional side of it, something rarely talked about but deeply felt. Windows 10 users spent years building routines around their systems. Shortcuts, habits, muscle memory. Switching operating systems can feel intimidating, even frightening. Zorin OS 19 understands this and intentionally softens the transition. The learning curve is gentle. Help is easy to find. The system doesn't punish curiosity or mistakes. Instead, it invites exploration at your own pace. The design of Zorin OS 19 plays a big role here. It's modern without being overwhelming. Clean without being sterile. Animations are smooth but restrained. Visual consistency makes the system feel cohesive and thoughtful. Nothing feels rushed or half-finished. For users burned out by constantly changing interfaces and forced redesigns, this stability is incredibly comforting. Another reason Windows 10 users are flocking to Zorin OS 19 is trust. Zorin OS has built a reputation over the years for being dependable, user-focused, and transparent. It's not backed by an advertising empire or driven by data collection. It's developed with a clear philosophy: make computing simple, elegant, and respectful. In 2026, trust is currency, and Zorin OS has earned it. Installation is another area where fear melts away quickly. Zorin OS 19 offers one of the smoothest installation experiences in the Linux world. Clear instructions, sensible defaults, options that make sense even to non-technical users. Many Windows 10 users report that installing Zorin OS 19 was easier than reinstalling Windows itself. Dual booting is straightforward, and for those ready to make a clean break, the process feels surprisingly empowering. Once installed, the system doesn't nag you. No pop-ups asking you to switch browsers. No constant reminders to enable services you don't want. No promotional notifications. Just a quiet, reliable desktop that lets you get on with your life. This sense of calm is something former Windows users often mention as one of the biggest differences. The computer fades into the background again, as it should. Performance tuning in Zorin OS 19 is another quiet strength. The system feels optimized rather than bloated. Memory usage is sensible. CPU spikes are rare. Even after hours of use, the system remains responsive. For users coming from Windows 10 machines that slowly degrade over time, this consistency feels almost magical. Security also plays a role even if users don't always think about it consciously. Zorin OS 19 benefits from a strong security model that doesn't rely on constant intrusive alerts. The system is resilient by design. Updates are fast and reliable. The risk of common malware is dramatically lower. For everyday users who just want peace of mind without installing multiple third-party tools, this built-in security is reassuring. Community is another factor driving the migration. In 2026, users don't want to feel alone when they make a big change. Zorin OS has an active, welcoming community that understands newcomers. Questions are answered without judgment. Tutorials are plentiful. Problems are solved collaboratively. For former Windows 10 users who are used to digging through confusing support pages or automated chatbots, this human connection matters. Cost is impossible to ignore. Zorin OS 19 is accessible without expensive licenses or subscriptions. In a time when software increasingly demands recurring payments, this simplicity is refreshing. Users can invest their money in hardware upgrades, accessories, or simply keep it in their pocket. For students and families especially, this affordability makes a real difference. Zorin OS 19 also shines in how it handles everyday details. Printer setup is straightforward. Wi-Fi and Bluetooth just work. External drives are recognized instantly. Displays scale properly on high-resolution screens. These small things add up, They create a sense that the system has been tested and polished for real-world use, not just for enthusiasts. Customization is there when users want it, but it never feels mandatory. Former Windows users can keep everything familiar or gradually personalize the system as they grow more comfortable. Themes, layouts, and workflows can evolve naturally over time. There's no pressure to become a power user just to feel at home. For many Windows 10 users in 2026, switching to Zorin OS 19 feels less like a leap and more like a natural step forward. It's not about rejecting Windows out of anger. It's about choosing something that aligns better with their needs, values, and expectations. Zorin OS 19 doesn't demand loyalty. It earns it. Stories keep repeating themselves. A user installs Zorin OS 19 on an old laptop just to try it. Weeks later, Windows is gone from their main machine. A family replaces a struggling Windows PC with Zorin OS, and suddenly everyone can use it without complaints. A small business avoids costly hardware upgrades and keeps running smoothly. These aren't edge cases anymore. They're becoming the norm. In 2026, the flocking isn't driven by hype or rebellion. It's driven by quiet satisfaction. Zorin OS 19 works. It respects the user. It extends the life of hardware. It protects privacy. It feels familiar without being stagnant. It proves that leaving Windows 10 doesn't have to mean giving something up. In many cases, it means gaining something back. For Windows 10 users standing at a crossroads, unsure of what comes next, Zorin OS 19 doesn't shout. It simply opens the door and says, "You're welcome here." And that, more than any feature list or benchmark, is why so many are walking through it.